Um, Welcome everyone to the ASAS webinar, interviewing in today's world panel discussion. Please use the question and answer button in the Zoom toolbar to submit your questions to the panel, either as a general question or addressed to a specific panelist. On our panel today, we have Dr. Mellencamp, Dr. Mosley, Mr. Zabakowski, Dr. Vanami, Dr. Fontes, and Mr. Chestnut. I will now turn everything over to the panel. Dr. Mellencamp, if you want to begin.
Yeah, hey, thank you, Justin. Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marnie Mellencamp. I'm an immunologist by training. I have a PhD in immunology from Miami University. I spent my first half of my career in human medicine, first at Creighton University Medical School, and then after that at University of Kansas Medical Center. I saw the light and went into animal health after that. My first position in animal health was at the University of Minnesota Veterinary College, and then I went into commercial science after that. So I have a bit of a checkered past, but I think I have a pretty broad past. And I've hired a lot of people in my time, so I'm excited to talk about how to interview and how to even get the interview at this point, especially during COVID. My current position is the head of outcomes research at Zoetis. Zoetis is a very large animal health company. We have about 10,000 colleagues. We work to create medicines and vaccines, as well as diagnostics, genetics products, and other types of things for animal health. My position is the head of a small group. We have 9 colleagues in my group, and we're all research investigators. So if you're interested in research, this might be the kind of position for you. We look at current Zoetis products and try to understand their value from a customer's perspective. So we're the interface between the R&D group and the customer. And we're trying to identify those different values that customers want to have that help solve their solutions in our products. So I think that's all for me.
Okay. Now turn everything over to Dr. Mosley.
Thank you very much. My name is Mose. I got my bachelor's and master's from Texas A&M, my PhD from University of Wyoming. I was able to talk my way into a job at the Upjohn company that went from Upjohn to Pharmacia to Pfizer to Zoetis. I've spent 36 years there working in product development as well as managing people. Along the way, I was called a biological irritant, and they suggested I improve my leadership skills, and I've become a Dale Carnegie instructor for the past 32 or 3 years. I spend a lot of time talking to people about personal development, and one of the things I talk a lot about is if you want a job, you got to convince them. And that's not going to advance.
You may have to click on it and then it should let you.
Click on it. Well, the point being is that when we come into a job, they are not hiring a resume, they are hiring you. And when you know more about your why you are here, why you want this job, you were able to take them forward to help them understand you. I look at Dale Carnegie, we talk about how to speak impromptu. When it's an interview, it's an impromptu situation. You're going to be asked questions, and the more effective you can be as a communicator, the more effectively you can convince them of the job. If I asked you right now, how many people are going into sales? Everybody better raise their hand. When you're coming into a job interview, you know what you're doing? You're selling. It is not a time to be reticent. It is a time to step forward and let them know who you are, why you're here, and why you want this job. So I believe that our career is our responsibility So the more we know what we want to do, why we want to do it, the more effective we could be at convincing the people sitting across the table, I'm the person you want to hire. I'm looking forward to question and answer period as we go forward. Thank you.
We'll now move to Mr. Zabakowski.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for letting me be a part of the discussion today. I'm John Zabakowski, and I'm a human resource business partner with Zimpro, and Zimpro manufactures and sells organic trace minerals to the feed industry, mainly from a business to business perspective, and some end consumers. Globally, we're a smaller organization, family owned, based here in the Minneapolis, Minnesota area, and that's where I'm located at here today. And as being an HR professional, most of my career has been spent in the agriculture industry and the animal science space, where hopefully I can add a perspective of not having the science background, but more the corporate HR standpoint that fits in nicely with this group. And as we think about whether it's your first professional job, or maybe it's you've had an internship, but maybe your first step into maybe more of the professional or corporate world, it's how can we use the experiences that we've had and use those as examples of things that you've done in your past. Even though it might not be a job, there's things that you've done that still apply to the business world, whether it's smaller jobs you've had in the past throughout your education, or things that you've worked on through your time at university. So again, pleased to be part of the discussion, and look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to Dr. Vanami.
Hi, thanks, Justin. My name is Kim Vanami, and I currently reside in Fargo, North Dakota, but I grew up in West Central Iowa and went to Iowa State University and got a bachelor's in animal sciences. And then from then on, I went and studied reproductive physiology. So down to Oklahoma State University, and then back to Iowa State University, and ultimately finished my degree at the University of Wyoming. Prior to my time in my current position, which is with Zoetis, and in fact, Marnie is my mentor and my boss, so that's great. I was at North Dakota State University, where I was on faculty. So I was on faculty almost 14 years. And during that time, I was part of many different types of search committees, whether it be for staff, faculty, graduate students, those kinds of things. My experience in the corporate world as far as interviews, besides interviewing myself, is a little bit more limited, but I think that there's many things that looking at how the interview process works, whether it be face-to-face, and then the few of the committees I've been on in 2020, there's still some tried and true things. And what's already been mentioned is be yourself, talk about kind of the uniqueness of you and what you can bring to the team, but definitely selling yourself, as Mose has said. So thanks again for allowing me to be part of this panel, and I look forward to other questions that you may have.
Thank you. We'll now move on to Dr. Fontes.
Well, thank you, Justin. So hello, everyone. I am Pedro Fontes, and I'm assistant professor with the University of Georgia. So I'm here in Athens, Georgia. I am originally from Brazil. So I was born and raised in Brazil. I went to vet school in Brazil. Then when I graduated from vet school, I moved to Florida. So I started my graduate program in Florida, and I finished my PhD at Texas A&M University. So I've been predominantly here in the Southeast, and I'm back here in Georgia now. I've been in Georgia for about a year now. And I think what I can bring to the table is definitely not as much experience as everybody else, but is the recent experience from coming, from finishing up grad school and applying for jobs. And I went through that about a year ago. And I'm looking forward for the Q&A session to share a little bit of that experience. I'm assuming that a lot of the folks that are listening are probably in that situation, wrapping up grad school and getting ready to apply for jobs, potentially in the academia. So yeah, a few things to keep in mind before we move into the Q&A session is, you know, For those of you that are wrapping up your PhDs or are in a postdoc position and are getting started and are starting to apply for jobs, one of the advices that I took from more senior faculty members was to really adapt yourself for the position that folks are offering, right? So if you're applying for a position that you're really interested in, and you know that that position it's a good fit for you, so how can you look at your background and shape the way you present your background and your experience to properly fit each one of the that given position that you're planning on applying to? So that's one of the things that I really encourage people to think about. And you know, before we switch to the Q&A session, I guess whenever we switch to the Q&A session component of this webinar, we can expand a little bit more on that. But looking forward to it. With that, I'll turn it back to you, Justin.
Thank you. We'll now turn things over to Mr. Chestnut.
Thank you, Justin. Welcome everybody, and thanks for joining this webinar. As Justin said, Justin Chestnut. I'm based in Boone, Iowa, Central Iowa. I've been with Elanco for going on 20 years now. And my day-to-day job is I'm the U.S. commercial director for our dairy business here in Elanco. Maybe a little bit about my history with Elanco. I went to school like Kim at Iowa State, but I only took one animal science class. My schooling's in agronomy and worked for Pioneer right out of school before I joined Elanco on the swine side when we were launching Paline. And so got my start in Elanco on the swine side, and depending what generation of Elanco you were in, some people see me as a swine guy, some people see me as a cattle guy, poultry guy, and now a dairy guy. So I've spent all of my side on what we call the commercial side of the organization, predominantly sales and marketing. And then had the privilege probably 8 years ago now going on. My family and I had the opportunity to go overseas to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, where Elanco has our Asia Pacific headquarters. So the first 2 years there ran 6 different countries, and the last year led our Asia Pacific marketing, which was on what we call the farm animal and pet health side. Did that before literally coming back home to where I grew up. A couple additional things about me of maybe why I'm here and a member of the panel is at Iowa State University, I'm the lead recruiter for Elanco. So not only do I recruit for the commercial side of our business, but also recruit for the R&D, finance, manufacturing, engineering. So have extensive experience there recruiting on campus. And then also many of you may have been involved with Agricultural Future of America, AFA, which is kind of the college version of FFA, do help out with recruiting there also. And then lastly, just this past year, you know, we've done a tremendous amount of our interviewing was all done because of COVID, was all done remotely via video conference. And then also this last year with a few of our customers led some presentations on helping their sales force on how to be more effective with selling virtually. And a lot of those same things that we'll probably talk about today, questions that may come up about interviewing, translate also into your post-school world as this continues on. I think, you know, the virtual format will be used more and more often. So thanks again, and I'll turn it back over to Justin.
Okay, thank you. So again, welcome everybody, and thank you for your introductions and little background there. It looks like we have some questions starting to come in. So again, for all the attendees, please submit your questions through the Q&A button. And panelists, if it looks like so far we've gotten a couple general questions to all panelists, if you would like to open up the Q&A button as well, and as you're answering, I will mark those as answered. So I'll kind of be cleaning things up on the back end while you guys are addressing the questions. And I'll turn it back over to you. Does everybody see the Q&A button first? Sorry.
Yes, got it.
Okay, perfect.
I'll take a stab at the first question. This is Marnie Mellencamp. It says, for all panelists, any advice for someone who's been searching for a job for almost a year with no luck? I can empathize with that. I think that's a very discouraging situation, but I think there are plenty of things that you can do to try to raise your visibility within the people you want to see. So one of the things I think is really important, and it's pre-interview, is networking. So you have your network of collegiate friends, your collegiate faculty. Those people are very valuable. If you think about who's on this panel, a lot of people on this panel know each other. And even though I came from human medicine, which is way far away from animal health, I came into animal health and animal science, and now developed my own network over the course of a few years. So I do think networking is very important. It's pretty hard, I think, to make that call. Call your old faculty, not old, sorry, your former faculty, and say, hey, I'm having trouble. Can you help me here? I think they'd be really, most of the people that I've worked with are very generous with their time and can help you. And if you can be receptive to that kind of help, I've had people who are receptive to that help if I help them with their CV or their interviewing techniques. And that's a hard thing. It's hard to pretend to interview with somebody you respect. But if you do that, I think you can sharpen the saw there. The other thing is the more people you know, the more people who know you're looking for a job, the better off you're going to be. So I have a few more things to say, but I'll leave it for someone else to give some additional advice for someone who's still looking for a job after a year.
I'd echo those same thoughts of, I'm sure many people on the panel have found their way into a job because of someone they knew. And so those connections can come from anywhere, whether it's the organizations you've been a part of, whether it's classes, faculty, friend of a friend of a friend of a parent, or whatever. There's some powerful tools, and don't be afraid to reach out to people that you might even have, excuse me, a small connection with. LinkedIn can be a great tool just to go down that kind of 6 degrees of separation, even to get a foot in the door or a conversation or an email, because some of those small conversations can go a long way from a whole stack of resumes to potentially pulling yours out to kind of have some line of sight to when there's a number of different applicants.
So this is Mose. I will come at it from a little different perspective. If somebody's been looking for a job for a year and they've interviewed with several places, an alternative way is to be courageous and go back and have a conversation with the hiring manager and saying, is there something I could have done more effective in the interview to help you understand who I am and my value? Now, that's going to take maybe some tough, thick skin. However, asking that question, you're going to get some feedback that may help you develop the piece that's typically holding you back. And if you don't know that, we make the same mistake over and over and over again. That's
tremendous advice, Mose. That is tremendous advice. And that is, you have to be courageous. The person on the other side of the desk has to be courageous too. It's a courageous conversation, but even though it stings a little bit, and I have to say the criticism that is probably the most true stings the most, because you sort of know that it's there. It's very valuable in moving you up to the next level where you might have a job. Really good, Mose.
Whether positive or negative, that feedback, I think, whether it's for interviewing or just as you go throughout your career, I think really viewing feedback as a gift, whether it stings or not. And then I think you're really, truly treating feedback as a gift just helps you grow professionally and personally.
So I'll make one more comment. This will be kind of broad. Most of the interviews today are virtual. If you're boring in real life, you are 100% more boring virtual. So learn how to speak into one of these screens. You're not talking to just a screen, we're talking to people. It's a skill set you can work on and develop. And I know I say that and I get the eye roll. So you got to be kidding. I'm a scientist, get over it. And I'm saying you're in sales. You're selling science. And I guarantee that Marnie, Kimberly, John, Pedro, Justin, we're all selling. And the more effective we can be at it, the more likely we can be noticed.
Hey, this is Justin. I'll maybe kind of move on to another question, and it actually appeared in the chat box, and it's, you know, in the swine industry position. I think you can all read it. It's sometimes if these positions are not posted, you know, how do we find out word of these? Using your network's very effective, but how do you advice that we would have for marketing yourself? I'll kind of give a real world example that it's going on today. I'm back in my hotel room right now. I'm up here in Sioux Falls. I'm at the Central Plains Dairy Conference, and I'll just maybe share some ideas. Is you go to that conference right now, and it's probably in reality 80% vendors, 10% customers. Find those opportunities of industry events that are going on and show up. So 2 years ago, there's a pre-conference on a Tuesday, and a grad student gave a presentation there, and I was an attendee, literally just learning, and did a phenomenal job. And so I went up to him afterwards and introduced myself. And I would say, always carry a resume. You never know when that opportunity may show up in an industry event that somebody may be interested in you and ask for your resume. So always carry your resume. Be at these industry type events. It's actually maybe more effective than on campus, where there's a career fair going on. I'm always recruiting, always every day recruiting talent. And if someone would come up to me today, hey, I'm XYZ from university, I'm finishing up my PhD, do you have a resume? I'm looking, I've got time to burn today. And it's a great opportunity to meet people. Another, use your professors for sure. A lot of times they're connected to industry people like us. Reach out to them, and those professors will usually reach out to us. Hey, I've got a great grad student you need to meet. Do some ride-alongs. Our technical team would be very open if a grad student would reach out. Hey, could I do a ride-along? Maybe if a company you're not familiar with, it may be an area you don't know if you want to go into. Take that opportunity to do a ride-along. Industry people would love to have that. And then I said, is use webinars or other things that are going on. So like a webinar of here today, right? There's 6 of us industry people here. Use those connections. Hordes Dairyman right before this had a webinar that I was a member of. There's industry people on that. So use those tools. There's always things that are going on in the agricultural community. What you may not think is a recruiting opportunity, it's more of a network building opportunity for you to find names. Usually you can find contact information and then put yourself out there. If I had a student or someone I was interested in do that to me, I'd be impressed, because just like Mo said earlier, that's a courageous move.
Thinking about the Zoom question and really what are some good tips or ideas of lots of conversations happen over Zoom now, especially in the current environment. And I think practice definitely is key. It's different speaking into your computer screen than looking someone face to face. So use FaceTime, use Zoom, use your colleagues, parents, friends to practice. And along with practice, this is super tactical, but can be super distracting, is make sure that internet and sound works properly, where I'm sure the 6 of us have all been on a meeting sometime in the last year, and someone's super choppy, or the audio is cutting in and out, or there's an echo. And not that it says anything about you as a person, but it's just distracting. And if you're interviewing that and there's another distraction versus what the content you're actually saying, I think the better if you can work any and all of those bugs out ahead of time. So practice with a person, but actually just practice to make sure you're comfortable with the technology as well.
So think about practice. What would you want me to practice? Many companies use different styles of interviewing. It's a fair question to ask the company, what is your style? Is it behavior based? Is it targeted selection? Is it based on Gallup? And then you can Google that and the questions are listed there. So lo and behold, you can prepare to tell me the most effective team you've been on. Why was it effective and what was your role? That's going to be asked regardless of what you do. So practice it. And people say, really, I can do that? Absolutely.
The internet has a lot of information about that kind of behavioral, all those kinds of interviewing skills. But it's very important for you to have your story, understand what your story is. You know, I think that I got thrown by a question once, thought I'd prepared for every question, and got thrown by a question by a senior leader. And it was really interesting as I look back on it, process, but I had done a lot of preparation for that interview. And even though I hadn't figured out that exact question, I had gone through those situations where I thought I was on an effective team, a situation where that went bad. That went bad and the outcome was negative. How did I handle that? There are all kinds of things like that on the internet that you can look at those questions. And if it's an answer from school, you know, you were on many teams to do group learning and group projects. If it's from outside of that, you were employed and so on, you can draw from everywhere. It doesn't have to be just an academic question or just one where you did it in a job, but it takes a lot of thought. And I find that it takes students, those are people who are inexperienced, quite a bit of time to get over the hump to actually do that, to dig deep, find out your why. Why do you really want to do this? And then what story is true? You have to have integrity. You can't tell stories that are false. You'll trip up on them. You have to tell a story about yourself and how you handled something. So you have to dig back and see, how does that reflect my leadership skills? How does that reflect, you know, a time where things went really well and I accomplished my research goal and made a lot of money for the company? Those things are really important. There's a tremendous amount on the internet to help you out with that. And then practice.
Just to add in a little there, I think one of the things that happened when I was helping students prepare for interviews when I was back in academia was I wish I could inject a little bit more courage or boldness. And sometimes I don't think the students would see the skill sets they had, or they thought, oh, everybody has that. Everybody, like, there's certain things that you're gifted at that you don't realize how valuable those are, such as people skills, communicating with others. And some of those things that come very easy to you, sometimes you forget to talk about. So I encourage you to use your mentors and your advisors, because they're going to point out things that sometimes you don't really may not notice that that's a gift. So that those are things that bring out your uniqueness. Those are the things that you should, when you tell your story, like Marnie said, how do you fit that in? Because some of those, sometimes you may not see the shining point of a gift that you do have. And so let others help discover that for you, even though you may have it, you just may not realize how good it is. So I just want to throw that in as well, because some of these are bold conversations, they're courageous, and you may be more talented than you realize in certain areas. So ask for input.
Yes, let me build in, expand a little bit on that from my experience, Kim, and I really think getting a little bit of mentorship for folks that are going to academia position from your graduate school advisor is really important. In my end, it was really helpful for me, and really helps you build trust on the set of skills that you develop during your training. But not only that, being able to communicate the set of skills that you have, because there's a lot of good people out there that sometimes they're interviewing for a faculty member position. They struggle with sharing their experience, and sometimes they're really working in a group that it's leading in a specific field, in animal science, for example, and they struggle to communicate that. So talking to someone that it's more senior, that can help you build your story well and share your expertise is really, really helpful. And that kind of merges with one of our next questions here. There was, what is the most valuable quality you see in those who interview successfully? And from my experience, being in a few committees now during this first year, it's that confidence of people that know their value and they can objectively share how they can contribute to the team that they are planning on becoming a member or getting hired from.
I'd say on one of the things that the quality we like to see when interviewing almost dovetails a little bit into what should we not be asking. And an interview is a chance for you to get to know the company as well. It's sure the company's interviewing the candidate, but now it's also the opportunity as you as an individual, is it a good fit for you? So what I think is a successful quality is someone that's able to ask those questions to make sure that it's a right fit for them too, because at the end of the day, we want it to be a good fit for both parties, not just employer or employee. It needs to be mutual. So I don't think there's a lot that you shouldn't be asking. What you should be asking is what's important to you to make sure that it's a good fit.
I'll maybe grab another question here. The question is, I've been encouraged in one of my classes to create a digital portfolio of myself and my academic progression in grad school. How often do you come across digital portfolios and how helpful are those in the hiring process? And I'll be interested to see how the panel responds here. There may be some differences here. If you would have asked me this question a year ago, I would have said, don't waste your time. That has completely changed now. And here's why I think it changed for me. Last year, a lot of students, master's candidates, PhDs, their summer plans got blown up because of COVID. And so plans changed. And so they didn't maybe have the experience that they hoped they would have had through their college progression. And I had a student that had built a digital portfolio. It was their name, xyz.com. And I went out and looked at it. And there was a couple things that it gave to me. Even though she didn't have that experience, like her resume probably didn't demonstrate what she had hoped it would at that point in her career, her digital portfolio described the things that she had done in a much, much greater level of detail than maybe what her resume had shown. And so I think we're all visual, to some extent, visual learners. And so one, it gave me much more depth into who she was and the experiences that she had. And secondly, and I'll say this on behalf of Elanco, sometimes we have jobs in our organization that when you see the title of what it is, you're like, what does that person even do? And so we may post, hey, we're looking for a PhD nutritionist in swine. But when I look at your portfolio and your experiences, and you give me examples of things that you've done, yes, you may have applied to be a PhD nutritionist, but when I look at your portfolio, I'm like, hey, there's this great role that we have in Elanco that you would be a great candidate for. Even though you didn't apply for that, you may, one, not even know that it exists, but two, based on what I can see that you've done, you would be a great candidate for that position. And so to me, it gives you the opportunity to demonstrate you maybe differently than others, because it is unique. A lot of people don't make a digital portfolio, and it would maybe allow me to shift or talk about a different opportunity that you maybe didn't know it existed.
I think we could go to the next question about Zoom. I think that digital portfolio, I have to say, I haven't hired anybody in the last year, so I haven't seen anything like that. But certainly, I think when we start to interview someone, or you look at their resume and you decide this is your short list of candidates, I look on LinkedIn. I look a lot of places to see what information can I get. I look at meetings to see what abstracts, what research they're doing. So I would think some piece of the internet that you can direct the story about you, as opposed to having me go looking and finding various pieces of information, would be very valuable. The question here is, do you think everything is going to stay doing Zoom interviews in the foreseeable future, even after COVID is over, or at least we're able to travel? I think that there's going to be quite a bit of remote interviewing going on. I used to start my interviewing process on the phone, so I actually like to do it better, online, or with a Zoom meeting or a WebEx or whatever, versus just on the phone. But I think that answer is yes. And so your skills as an interviewee, as an interviewer, have to be up to par on when you're doing it remotely, because I think that's going to stay. I'd be interested to hear what others think.
Yeah, I'd agree, especially, most corporations or companies have realized there's an expense saved not to fly somebody in for an interview, and you can get the exact same quality with a conversation like this. So I think industry-wide, companies have realized that we can save money by cutting down some travel expenses for having conversations like this. Will some still be in person, final rounds, things like that? I think it'll be a hybrid approach where, depending on role, where the role is located, kind of what level in the organization it is. But I think it will be a hybrid approach for sure. As companies have realized that we can do it this way, and to be honest, it's cheaper to do it this way.
So, and I would back it up still one step. Marnie, you mentioned it. The phone interview is not going away. One of the first screening tools is on the telephone, and people, we just blow it off. Man, if you don't pass the phone interview, you don't get to the next one.
Right.
So again, it's prepare yourself, isolate yourself, get focused to where you can be outgoing. You can be more. How do you convey passion on a phone? Don't you want to work with passionate people? Absolutely. Is that a characteristic we want? Absolutely. Then act like it. Whether it's on the phone, it's on Zoom, it's person. Conveying that who we are, that essence of who we're hiring, is very critical. Oh, well, I'm shy, I'm reserved. Get over it.
I think one of the things that I say is, I want you to be yourself, but I want you to be the best version of yourself. Yeah. Know the rules. Like Mo said, you don't skip over the phone interview. You do the phone interview, and that's a go, no-go point for you. You do the Zoom interview, and that's a go, no-go point. And then if you get to go in, now that's really a go, no-go point. And I've talked to many people who have gotten to the interview, and then they don't get the job. So then you have to go back, and I think the hiring manager input, some people will tell you, some won't. But you really need to know the process, know the rules. You come in jeans and everybody else has a suit on. Whether it should be this way or not, there's going to be a judgment about you. So I think you do. That's what I mean by knowing the rules. For every action, there's a consequence. You may be fine with wearing jeans, but you need to understand that consequence if you're going to look at, say, a big East Coast company, because their dress code is going to be different than yours. That information is pretty easy to find. So know the rules, be prepared, and be the best version of yourself. If you have to practice that confidence, go practice it with someone. Passion is very important, not crazy passion, but passion about what you're doing. And for the most part, I find that animal science students, whether they're bachelor's, master's, or PhDs, are very passionate about what they do. And they have very good problem-solving skills. And that's an important trait no matter where you are. And when Mo said we're all in sales, it's absolutely true. I don't get my budget unless I sell it up the chain. So I could have the greatest ideas, but if I can't sell how important that is for our company to progress, then I don't get what I need in my job. So selling yourself, as well as understanding that sales is not something bad. Sales is education. It's helping someone solve their problem. As a hiring manager, you have a problem to solve. You have to find someone who's a good fit for that position. Help me solve my problem by providing those things about you that will make you a great colleague on my team.
So there's a question here that was directed to me. Please comment on cultural differences that should be taken into account during interviewing for those coming from abroad. Your experience being in the US and being from Brazil. So honestly, from my experience, I had no specific challenges associated with coming from Brazil. I think the main barrier that we see is the language barrier. If you can overcome that well, if you're going for a position where you're going to have to communicate, you're going to have to improve your English as much as you can. But also, I think you can use that to your advantage as well, right? So coming from Brazil, Brazil has a strong agricultural industry, right? Regardless of whether you're talking about crops of livestock. And you coming from Brazil, you have an international experience or at least knowledge from a country with a strong agricultural background. So that's something you can use to your advantage, right? So if you're interviewing, for example, in my specific example, I'm in charge of teaching beef production, right? So I use that to bring a different perspective to the students, right? And that's something that I brought up in my interview. And you know, things are getting more and more globalized, right? So if we're preparing students for the future, if they have more of an international knowledge of the industry, that's beneficial for them and makes them more competitive. So you can bring that you have that perspective, and you can bring that perspective to the table and contribute. Another limiting factor as well is folks that do not have a knowledge of the US industry. So if you're coming straight from Brazil and applying for jobs here, make sure that you've been involved with the industry in the US, because a lot of times you're going to have, there are things that are country specific, right, with regards to their livestock industries. So you need to have that knowledge to be considered as a candidate. So yeah, but from a cultural standpoint, I don't think that there are limitations. You can turn that into an opportunity to bring something new to the table.
Maybe just a follow-up to that, Pedro, is I would say is have the confidence. So many times when we're interviewing people that English is their second language, they spend a lot of time during the interviewing apologizing for their lack of English not being their first language. Don't do that. We get it that English isn't your first language, and hey, I'm here to say I only speak one language. You many times speak 2, 3, or 4, and we know that you're doing translating and then translating it back out. So we get it that what you're doing is way more difficult than what I'm doing. Be confident in that. You use that like Pedro's strength. You have a background that we don't have. Use that as a strength and be confident. Don't spend your time apologizing during the interview that English isn't your first language.
And I've been here in the US for about 7 years now, and my English is still not perfect. So you got to go out there and just speak your mind and try to improve your English as much as you can. And it's a constant battle. I'm probably making mistakes right now as I talk, but you know, I'm still getting the word out there, and folks can understand you for the most part.
So I grew up in East Texas, and I talked a lot like this when I first started. After my first presentation in a national meeting, my boss said, "You done good on part of it, but we've got to get you some elocution lessons." I said, "What is that?" He goes, "Public speaking 101. So yep. I get it.
Yeah, as a native English speaker, I had to improve my grammar. I had to improve so much of that as well. So I think those are things that we can all do to improve ourselves as we move forward, especially in job interviews. I was going to jump to the focus on publications or experiences question, if that's okay. So the comment of, does it depend on academia or industry? I guess I see, obviously these are all important. When I see a publication though, there's a couple things that are unwritten on your resume. One is you're a completer. So there's a lot of stuff that's done that is never written up and it's never published. And so when I see that, and I know as a student, you're working with your mentors on this, but it's really nice to have that publication done, because not only is it the science behind it and all of that, if you can speak on that publication, it shows your leadership in that role, but you completed it. And the biggest thing that I think happens out there, there's a lot of science left in filing cabinets or on a computer. So it's really good to see that done. The other thing about presentations or teaching opportunities, I think another thing, those are really important. And when you, just as mentioned earlier, when you see somebody get up and speak at a scientific meeting, or even when you might be in an extension event or something like that, you see how that person handles different types of questions, as well as how their mind is thinking, and then how it gets back to sales. How are you going to sell this project? Do people understand what you did? So publications are important. And it also shows that you know how to write. Writing is really important. And it also shows that you can take a bunch of different information and bring it together and show that strength in taking ideas and moving them forward. So please for those of you who are graduate students, I would say your mentors will be very happy if you get it to the stage of completion so that you can go ahead and submit that. So highly encourage you to do that.
A quick comment on that as well is that if you do get the job, and in your first few months, you're gonna have deadline for grants and things like that, and you're still writing your graduate work, that might hold you back a little bit. So getting that out of the way, it's important.
Jumping to the question about what are good questions to ask in an interview that stand out. I think a little bit to my comment previously, but I think questions around on the culture and asking the person that's interviewing you is why do you like coming to work here? What motivates you each morning to get up and come to work, or what excites you about working for whatever the company or organization or school that you're interviewing with. I think getting that perspective to allow the interviewer to reflect on their own journey helps stand out.
Another question is, what is required to be successful at this job or this company? What are the attributes? What are the activities? And what are the people sides that I need to work on and to develop? And how is that measured? Are we measured on what we've written, talks we've given, the amount of money that comes in? How do you know?
I think again, part of that's an intimidating, it's an intimidating question. Do you have any other questions for me? You know, when I say that, people say like, no, you covered everything. No, I didn't. I did not cover everything. You need to know, like in my situation, you need to know about Zoetis. You need to know about what we do for a living. And you can find a lot of this on the internet. If you look at our annual report, and I'm sure it's the same for Zinpro. Well, Zinpro's family owned, so I'm not quite sure it's on the internet, but Elanco for sure. You can find out about our culture. You can find out about what we value. And so that then could lead you to a question or to something. How do you interact with other departments? I think that's really important. And I don't think I've ever covered everything in an interview. So you should have something additional to ask. And yeah, prepare it. Absolutely.
I read an article just recently that said, what is one of the #1 responses people hate at the end of an interview to receive? It's like you said, I've asked you, you've been here for a day or day and a half. You've had a lot of time. Do you have any more questions? No, I'm done. That is absolutely the wrong answer. Thank you for having me in. I appreciate this opportunity. I've learned a lot. Here's a couple of things I'd like to know more about. It shows, like you said, Marnie, that you've thought about it, you care about it, you're reflecting.
Mm-hmm.
Also, don't be afraid to write them down. And I can go both ways on this.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll have candidates that they'll open up, and I would say the quality of the questions aren't very good. It's like their standard list that they always have, and they're asking them. That's not so impressive for me. But many times they open up, they flip to their book, and I can see that they've clearly done their homework, because the questions kind of bounce around to different areas. Well thought out, great questions. That's impressive to me. Shows you did your research, you did your homework, you were prepared, and there were things that you thought through ahead of time that you wanted to make sure that you didn't forget about. That to me is well done. So don't be afraid to write those down.
On that same note of it shows you did your homework, where there's so much information on a company's website now, or an organization's website, where ask about something specific that shows you did your homework too. And someone mentioned the values too. I think it's important, whether it's posted on a website or posted, you see it in the lobby, the values of an organization listed on the wall. I think it's important to ask, how do you see those values actually come to life in the organization? And that gives you a sense then of, are they just on a conference room wall, or did the employees and team members, colleagues actually live by them?
I can tell you the one question I hate. Tell me your greatest weakness. Why in the hell would I give you a bat to beat me with? I don't understand it. It sounds good on this side of the table, on that side. I don't get it. And when asked, I've said, I see that in this job, it requires this additional skill set. I believe if I got better in that skill set, it could help me do X, Y, Z. But that question is a slippery slope. So I think it's
I don't ask that question. Yeah, I don't ask that question, because I think people say things like, I'm not that good at time management, but I'm taking a time management course, so I'll get better at it. Because it asks you to tell something bad, but you have to say something good. So I think you're right, though. You maybe ask that question, and you have to have a confident answer. But, I don't like to get up until 10 a.m., so I'll never be here at 8. Don't say that. You have to have integrity, and you have to be honest, but you don't have to be that honest. You have to present yourself in the best possible light. There are boundaries. Respect those boundaries. Sometimes I think people get nervous, and then they start to tell you stuff, and you think, I don't want to know any more of that. So be careful about letting your nerves get away from you, or not respecting your own boundaries. And all of that is preparation, I think.
And it's my role to get the candidates speaking so that they do come. And it's amazing what people share. The quote says, give them what they need to know, not everything you know. There's a line in there idea. To be able to answer the question, yet not too much.
I'm sure we all have examples of times we asked the question and it went down a personal path that we learned too much about the person that we didn't need to know about. So I like that, try and stay on the right path of what we need to know.
There's another question for you, Dr. Fontes.
Yes, I guess there are two here. I'll get the first one as well. I am 45 years old, from another country, good experience in academia, and try to get a job in the US. Do you think age could be a factor against me? I don't know, maybe let everybody chime in and make a comment. But in my opinion, I don't know, I'm not the most experienced person out there. I'm just been in academia for a year now. So, but what my opinion is that if you have a good publication record and you're active and you're making a difference in your field, if you're a leader in the field, I don't think that's the age is a limiting factor. One of the things you keep in mind if you're coming to the US, you got to be familiarized, mainly if you're in a research position, is how to bring money to your program, right? Because that's different depending on the country that you're at. So if I was interviewing in a situation like that, I would try to make sure that you can prove that you can do that. Because that's ultimately what universities are looking for, people that can have an independent program and they can hit the ground running from a funding standpoint. So you need to highlight that you have the abilities to bring that money. And that can be a little bit challenging if you're outside, if you're from outside of the US.
But again, I would say on that end, just being on several committees, hiring faculty, do your homework. Where are opportunities to get funding? So you can do that kind of homework before you come in. And there was another question, and maybe it's gone now, but when you are applying for academic positions, we know sometimes depending upon the position and, whether we're looking for those who have postdoc experience or not, that might be in the job description, but we want you to bring in like, okay, I know I have not successfully been awarded a grant because I'm fresh out or just had a short postdoc, but here's all the places that I know that I can seek funding from, and make it broad, not only federal sources, state sources, industry sources. Let them know you're thinking about how you're going to balance that, because the more diverse you are in your funding your program, the more successful you're going to be. So I guess I would just throw that in there to add what you said.
Yeah, that was great, Kim. And I think that kind of answers the follow-up question that was directed specifically to me, but that's exactly right. If you're young, so basically that question is, if you're young and experienced, applying for an assistant and associate type of position, how can you compete with associates, right? Folks that have been promoted, have been through the tenure process. The reality is, ultimately, you got to think about yourself as a product that the department is going to be, I guess, purchasing. So you can bring some things to the table. You're probably going to be less expensive for the department, right? So there's some benefits from being inexperienced. But at the same time, you got to show that on the long haul, you're going to be potentially more productive than those folks that are applying on the associate level. And a lot of times, if you have good leadership in the department, they can understand that. They can see someone that has a bright future ahead, and they're willing to, bet on those people. So it's not all bad if you are inexperienced and you are applying for a position with folks that are more experienced, because they might have a greater publication record, or maybe a greater ability to bring money into the program at that point, but maybe on the long haul, you might be a better bet. So communicating that, and hopefully you're going to depend on the leadership that it's hiring you to appreciate that and have the ability to recognize that as well.
Just to add there, I think folks on those kind of search committees are also looking at trajectory. So when you come in as somebody fresh out of your program, we see the potential, but we also see, and whether it be in animal science is a small world, we do go to the same meeting. So if you're really going toward that academic position, I had wonderful mentors who watched me stumble in my first scientific meetings. And then at the end, they're like, it's time for you to graduate. When are you going to get a job? And I think those are things, they see you grow already, and they're going to continue to, I guess, be your champ or your little cheerleader as you go forward too, as you're trying to get those positions. So seeing that kind of trajectory going forward too, I think is really important. And those letters of recommendation help that too, when you apply for positions.
And another quick comment is putting yourself in the shoes of the folks that are hiring you as well. I feel like that's a good tip, mainly for young people, because we don't, coming out of grad school, a lot of times you don't understand how the system works and how to be successful in a faculty member position, and talking to your mentors and making sure you understand that process, that might make you look more experienced when you're applying as an assistant professor.
So for me, it's not enough to be smart. It's not just about the degrees or the papers or the grants. It's the package. So if I'm an inexperienced person, what I have to bring is this other side, the trajectory, as you called it. Here's my passion. Here's where I'm headed. This is where I think I can fit. This is what I want to do. And this is why I want to do it. And when you can bring the passion and that along with some of the credentials, the vote's going to go over here. And that's irrespective of age.
I agree. I agree with that. I've seen many people who are, let's say, mature like me, getting promoted, getting hired. It's because of what they brought, and it wasn't because of how old they were.
Yeah.
On the question of do you give feedback to the candidate during an interview, I will say in general, I do not. I wouldn't want to assume in the middle of an interview, this isn't somebody I'm going to hire. I might know that, but I'm not going to do that. I think it's we're rather restricted as to how much feedback we can give, but I have given feedback afterwards when someone calls me to ask me that. So I don't know how the rest of you feel.
I have a very specific example. The interviewer was told, here's the process we're using, and you need to tell your story. She understood that. We started the process, and after answering about 2 or 3 questions that she got from the back of some book she had read, and I said, I want to call a timeout. I'm taking off the interview hat, putting on a coaching hat. In order for you to be successful, we need your story, what you've done, how you've handled it. Do you understand this? Yes. Changed hats, time back in, and it was very helpful for me as an interviewer and for her to realize that other stuff wasn't working.
The question about a gap in employment, I would have to say, I mean, I have not generally seen too big a gap in employment with the folks that I have interviewed in the past. Most of the time, if we had a gap when I was younger and doing a postdoc, we just did another postdoc because there weren't any jobs. So at least we filled our time with something that we could show had value to the next position. So I think it's been very hard if people have lost their jobs and then coming up with something like that, some kind of volunteering activity or something, but you could educate yourself in different areas so that when the next opportunity arises, and I don't say job, because I have to say in my career, I've never really known what the next job was, but I moved to a new opportunity. So whatever that opportunity is, if you're in animal health, or if you're in animal science and you want to focus on swine, really help yourself get more knowledgeable in that area. Dairy, there are lots of ways to get more knowledgeable, and you could put that on your resume or explain that when you're talking about the gap in your history. I expect others have better ideas than I do.
The job is what you do. Why is who you are and how you're contributing, right? We're applying for a job, yet we're hiring people. I'm not hiring a resume. So how do you, and then the question is, how do you answer what about that blank spot? You better have an answer because it's going to be asked.